We're gonna get started. We might have some more members joining, but we'll get started with the current members. Thank you, everyone, for attending this annual meeting of the Housing Council for the City of Columbus's residential community reinvestment areas. My name is Jeremy Heater-Druitt, Program Manager for the Residential Tax Incentive Program. We also have our team here. We have David Parrish, Kimberly Brugman, and Heidi Ferguson. Virtually, we have also Talisa Monaghan, and then here also we have Edward Donis Madison, who oversees our downtown CRA and the commercial CRAs. First, I'm going to give an overview of the residential tax incentive program itself, and then we'll get more narrow to the duties of the Housing Council and the voting action today. Once the voting actions are completed, we will move on to program outcome data as well as list of updates. One moment, I'm informing CTV that we are officially getting started.
Are you recording this also?
Yes, it is being recorded and will be available on YouTube.
Okay. You would think with all the things that are going up, it would be like hours and hours long.
This is the current roster for the Housing Council. Each member serves a term of 3 years. We have Robert Williams and Maud Hill, who are appointed by the mayor. We have Jessica Klinger and one vacant seat that are appointed by City Council. Janice K. Shanklin is appointed by the Development Commission. And we have 2 members that are appointed by the Housing Council itself. This would be Deborah Diggs and Matthew Hansen. Starting at a high level, I want to frame this program in the context of the Columbus Housing Strategy. Mayor Ginther has challenged the leaders of our region to produce the housing units we need to continue to grow. Central Ohio as a whole needs around 200,000 housing units built over the next decade. The City of Columbus has committed to deliver half of that, 100,000 housing units over the next decade. The residential tax incentive program is one tool amongst many others that we employ to help get us toward that goal. This program offers property tax abatements as an incentive to build new housing or to renovate existing housing. This is tied directly to investments. The existing tax bill on the property would remain, but any increase in taxation that is directly due to that residential construction can be abated for up to 15 years. It is a voluntary program that project sponsors can choose to participate in. We offer this in about 85% of the city's geography. To your right, you'll see a snapshot of the South Side neighborhood. This will feed into the next slide. You'll see some green, some blue, some yellow, and some white. These represent the area designations that inform our affordability requirements, as well as some carve-outs. Before I move on, the white area represents one of our commercial CRAs. That's one area that Edward Donis Madison, who's in attendance, oversees. So we try to right size where are we offering which incentives to deliver the right investment for those communities. And I'll flip back and forth to show this economic and neighborhood differentiation. But so starting with the market-ready areas, these are the ones that are in green. These are the highest opportunity areas. All these go by census tracts, but to speak about it in terms of neighborhoods, you can think about this as the Short North, Clintonville, and parts of our suburban communities, although you'll see these patchwork throughout the city. These areas have plenty of investment already, but what they don't have is a diversity in price point and unit type to support all of our residents in the city. And so you will see the greatest amount of affordability requirements tied to those areas. On the home ownership side, only households that earn 120% or less of AMI in these areas could qualify. Whereas if it's a rental product, There's a number of options the project sponsor can follow to meet the affordable housing requirement. Option one, which we call the deeper affordability option, this is 10% of units rented at or below 60% AMI and 10% rented at or below 80% of AMI. One moment. Option two, this is what we call a wider affordability option. This would be 30% of units rented at or below 80% AMI. And finally, option three is to pay a fee in lieu of those affordable housing units. The calculations are described there. Ready for revitalization is the middle tier. These are neighborhoods that are in transition. The rental and homeownership requirement are identical to market ready. The fee in lieu option is slightly less. And then finally, ready for opportunity. These are the neighborhoods that need the most investment. There is no homeownership requirement. If you're a homeowner in these areas, you will qualify for this incentive. There is a rental requirement, but you'll notice the AMI percentages are at higher amounts. Instead of 10 at 60% AMI and 10% at 80% AMI, it's bumped up to 10% at 80% AMI and 10% at 100% AMI. This helps the projects pencil out when a project sponsor is investing in a new area. And the fee in lieu option is offered here as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the map, the area that's not colored, is that commercial or industrial? Okay.
Yes, that's an example of a commercial CRA. That's the South Side Investment District, in which that snakes along the south side and some of the industrial corridors. Not to put Edward on the spot, but Edward, is there anything you would want to say about South Side industrial incentives and how it's performing?
Yeah, I mean, they function relatively similar as the housing CRAs do, as up to 15-year, 100% tax abatement. We tried to map them along with existing industrial and commercial properties, so we're not overlaying over current housing, but my department, as well as Jeremy in housing, are proactively working to make sure that we cover any new housing that ends up popping up here and there within the industrial corridor.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Edward. And yeah, to expand on his last point a little bit more, these boundaries are not set in stone. We do adjust them periodically to support the changes in those neighborhoods. Those map adjustments do require legislation, so it's not something we do all the time. But we do try to right size us to the activity going on in those neighborhoods. Going back to the Columbus housing strategy, why does supporting housing at all these various price points and all these different communities matter? Why are we, what is the point of the exercise of going through and looking at the economics of these census tracts and right-sizing the affordability to that neighborhood? One reason I like to bring up here is that the lack of housing supply is impacting households across the entire income spectrum. There's not a household in Central Ohio that is not impacted by the shortage in some way. They will feel that pressure in different ways, though. For households that earn over $75,000 annually, the pressure they're experiencing is a lack of choice or lessened choice. 15 years ago, a household of that income could choose a neighborhood that really fit their needs. They might have chosen a home in Clintonville, Schumacher Place, and with the lack of housing supply, there's more competition for that desirable housing. And households in this income bracket are now moving into either other areas of the city they would not have looked at before, such as Northland, North Linden, Franklinton, or they might be driving until they qualify, driving outside the city limits, outside the county, until they can find a housing that meets their price point. But that lack of choice then impacts residents that are in the areas where they are now moving to. For households that are earning between $25,000 and $75,000, the pressure they're experiencing is a lack of opportunity. We at the city define housing as being affordable when a household need not spend more than 30% of their income on housing. But families in this income bracket often spend up to 50% of their income on housing. they're finding a way to make the end rent payment or mortgage payment work, but they're making some pretty harsh economic sacrifices in other areas. They may be deferring educational opportunities, whereas they could have advanced their career that way. They might be pulling back on childcare, which creates a whole other area of uncertainty when you have a family. They might be getting a second or third job to get that income a little bit boosted to make that rent payment. And finally, households that are on the lower end of the income spectrum, those earning less than $25,000, they are experiencing a lack of stability. When a family in this income bracket is in a unit that may not be safe and sanitary, either the unit itself or the neighborhood, when there's a lack of supply, they can't leave and find a different unit that meets their economic situation. The landlord might exploit that tenant, knowing that tenant has nowhere else to go. Or that tenant might eventually become homeless if they truly cannot make that rent payment. So I share this while these are not directly linked to our 3 area designations, it does show that across the income spectrum, housing units do matter, we need more supply, and families do experience this in all sorts of ways. Yes, Deborah?
The button.
It should be live. You might want to pull it closer to you, though. I had to do that for myself.
I noticed Jessica touched hers.
Okay.
So I do have a question, and I
Yeah.
probably have asked you this before. The incomes, how often do we look at the adjustment of changing the numbers? I mean, is that done annually, or is that done on a regular basis? Like 75,000 sounds like a nice income, but with inflation of food and gas and childcare and things, how often is this looked at to reevaluate the incomes?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We are currently on a 5-year program review cycle. The next official review would not be until 2030. However, that does not preclude us changing things earlier than that. We are looking at the feasibility of updating these numbers to particularly reflect the environment we are experiencing today, an inflationary environment, an environment where tariffs are impacting materials. It is something we want to keep updated to make sure that we're not just declaring a census tract market ready, ready for revitalization, ready for opportunity, but how is that tract changing? So we are looking at updating that information. I don't have more specifics at this moment, but I'm happy to share that with you as we go down that process.
So is there a possibility, or is there an opportunity at any point in time for individuals to approach the city to say that we would like to have them do a feasibility study to reevaluate some of this, because the housing market is so tight right now? And I was watching something and they were saying people are starting to renovate and do other things rather than, because you can't find housing. It's just not, like, to your point, we're not building it fast enough.
Yeah. So two prongs in my response there. One is in terms of the area designations themselves. If you're a resident in one of these already eligible census tracts, absolutely, feel free to reach us if you feel that that doesn't feel right to you. And everyone's experience is going to be different, of course. Not everyone in a given tract is going to feel this housing crunch the same way. But I have gotten some feedback about some of these census tracts, and we do keep track of that. The second portion of my response is a little bit tied back to that commercial CRA discussion. We do try to expand the residential CRA to cover new housing developments. Whether those housing developments that are proposed are currently in a commercial CRA or in a TIF area, that's another area where we sometimes carve things out of the residential CRA. One thing that we've talked about a lot, Edward and his team and I, is particularly about the South Side. It's one of the reasons I brought up that image, is that there's a lot of new activity, particularly on the residential side on the South Side. And so we do want to make sure that we are incentivizing the housing that we need in all areas.
Well, I asked that because the Catholic Church that's down the street from me went down, and they're going to do new builds. And so in all seriousness, a new build is going to impact my property taxes and my ability to stay in the home that I currently own. And so I can't move anywhere else, but the plans was to make the house livable to what do you call it, age respectfully in. And so I just was wondering if they look at adjusting that because our housing prices have went up and they're gonna go up with the new build and it's gonna be like a tidal wave come through.
Yeah, I do hear that. And with regards to property tax valuations, I tend to direct folks to the Fran County Auditor. We at the city, and even with this program, we don't influence the actual tax valuations. We just offer the incentive to alleviate some of the tax stress. But I do hear that from residents, yeah.
And I just thought about it when you was talking about the childcare and the food and gas prices went up, 70 cents over the weekend, one weekend, even more so. So as this stuff starts going like this and property values with it and new builds are not going up fast enough.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Before I get into the voting actions and the duties of the Housing Council itself, so at the end of the presentation, I will go over program outcome data as well as legislative updates. So if you have questions about outcomes, I'm happy to talk about that afterwards as part of the official meeting. But as far as the high level about the housing strategy, about the res tax program, about the affordability requirements, any other questions about those? Okay. Now, to get more narrow to the duties of this body, under Ohio Revised Code, whenever a city or a township creates a residential CRA, a housing council must be created to oversee certain functions of it. The reason we are all here today is due to the annual inspection requirement. So any property that has an active abatement on it through this program, we are required to inspect that property on the exterior. And if there is any sign of deterioration or neglect, ORC empowers the city to revoke that abatement. It's not a requirement that we revoke it. How we have operationalized that as a program at the city is that after we send the housing tech team out to inspect the properties, which this year was about 4,300 different properties, they then bring back their findings to us with photos. I'm going to skip to the next slide and I'll return here. Here are examples of findings that, working with the tech team, they've determined these to be relevant to the health and safety of the families, as well as the integrity of the structure. Things like code violations, peeling paint that might expose the material to the elements, signs of abandonment, fire damage. You can read these at your leisure, and this is also in your packet. But it's this kind of lens that we look at when we determine properties to recommend for possible revocation. But what we do is, with this body's affirmative vote on the list of properties we recommend, we issue a finding letter to the property owner describing the issue we found, a photo of that finding, and we give them 6 months to remediate it, either with a photo of the completed work or an invoice or work order showing that the repair was made. Most of the time, property owners are very responsive to that, and we do track compliance with that. Sometimes an owner is absentee. Sometimes it takes a second letter. And I'll go into the details of our findings in a moment, but in those letters, we also offer resources. If there's a property owner that doesn't have the means to make that repair, we redirect them to other public sources that might be able to help them with that repair. Our goal is to first get the properties remediated. Revoking the abatement is really a last resort for us. So this is a rather hard to read list. So I'm going to pull up the PDF so we can zoom in a little bit.
Thank you.
Of course. Hold on a moment, please.
That's when you really start to feel old. You got to get the flashlight trying to read the little bitty print. Oh, here we go.
That's better.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Of course. I'm trying to put this back. There we go. This was distributed to the Housing Council members about a week ago. But we have here the ownership, really the most important column here is on the right. We don't accept every inspection. When the housing tech team gives us their list, we do go through these one by one, determine is this worth recommending to the housing council. We do remove some. I believe we removed 5 or 6 this year that we felt were not worth recommending. Something I do want to highlight, though, is that we do have a number of repeats this year, which, by the way, I'll scroll through this slowly. If I'm going too fast or too slow, please tell me. We did have a number of repeat findings this year. There were actually about 12. Now, 6 of those were part of one condo complex. You might think of that as one property, in which case you might think of this as 7 repeat findings. One finding was for a property that had been cited in the past, but this is a different issue, so we consider that a new finding. And there is one that this is their second repeat, and so that is one that we do intend to revoke, given it's an abandoned property, it's boarded up, property owners are not responsive despite our best efforts. So that is one that we do intend to file with the Franklin County Auditor to revoke. And by the way, I do have the photos themselves. I did not share that ahead of the meeting because the file was too large. But if there's any one of these that you're particularly interested in, I'm happy to pull up the photo.
Jeremy, can you clarify when the abatement is revoked? Does that just apply for the current year, or does that also apply to past years?
Thank you for that question. It does not apply to past years. Past years of the abatement are not revocable, but this would be a moving forward. So for the next tax year, that's the first year of revocation.
Thank you.
So I do have, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't need to talk into that. So when you say trash, you're not talking about trash that just, like last night with the storm, trash blew into my yard. You're talking about like trash, right?
That's correct. This would be an example of long-standing
Okay.
neglect of the yard work. Yeah, this would not be a transitory situation like you might be describing.
Clarification.
And Jeremy, do you have a sense of if any of these properties were new builds or were these all like renovations that then?
Great question. In this spreadsheet, I don't distinguish between new build and renovation. There is certainly a mix of both. For example, these condos, which is a repeat finding from last year, those are new build condos. I would venture to say no, I'm not going to speculate. It's a really good mix of both new build and rehab. But if you want a more specific breakout, I'm happy to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think what that would say to me is probably 2 different situations, depending on, like a new build, I would assume maybe that's just not good construction to begin with, whereas with a renovation, I think maybe the question would be, was the work done at all or done up to the standard that would be required? Mm-hmm. So I think it would tell you 2 different things, which I think would be interesting, but to whom, I don't know. But
Yeah,
you know.
That's an interesting point. Definitely worth bearing in mind.
And I agree with what you were saying, because I'm looking at the chipping paint on all the West Second Avenue. Did they use that really cheap paint?
To begin with.
You know, and so it resulted in, or did they use some really good paint and, you know, it's just chipping away because of
Weather.
weather and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting, but it looks like they may all be new builds because they're all right there together.
Yes, I can confirm that these ones on Second Avenue are part of one condo complex. And it was, I'm happy to follow up. It is definitely a new build within the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, and I guess the period is 15 years. So, so to think you have chipping paint in 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not terribly recent that that was approved. I'm trying to remember from memory, so forgive me if this is off. I believe that that set of the condos were 10-year, 75% abatements through the AC Humco CRA.
Okay.
tell you, we got the Central Land Trust.
Oh, yeah.
That's one, we do keep track of the ownership. Sometimes some owners come back multiple times with different properties. It does matter. It helps us understand the market.
Well, if you're in violation, you're in violation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and Jeremy, in this list, you list the property owner, and then all the properties underneath that one are the same owner. So like,
Thank you for that clarification. No, so that's part of the difficulty of the spreadsheet being so wide. So the reason if it's owned by a person or persons, we have the ownership over here. If it's a business, we put it over here.
Got it, okay.
Okay, see, I was assuming that if they were blank on that one, that's because it's a private individual, okay.
And when the inspectors go out and inspect, I see a lot of, chipping paint. They're issuing a notice for the remediation, and the property owner has sufficient time and during, a season that they can go out and do the work.
Yeah, we give them a 6-month turnaround.
Okay.
Given that we are issuing these letters in late March, early April, this gets them until about October.
So
Yeah.
these are all violations that we initially started seeing last year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the question about the trash, like, so did you go one day and there was like bags of trash, maybe they raked the leaves or cut the grass or something and left it there, and then you go back in 6 months and it's still, or
Right.
3 months and it's still sitting there. You've given them ample time to, yeah, but some of it is just like, it's really challenging because like an awning or something like that, you may have to replace. Does the city, to your point, giving the citations, are there also opportunities for resources if they reach out or if they say, yeah?
Yeah, we include a list of potential resources if property owners do need some assistance with making those types of repairs. And of course, if they were to reach out to us directly, we're also happy to redirect them, whether there's a program internally or externally that might be able to assist.
Because I'm looking like at the South Ohio paint porch. I mean, come on, y'all. To lose your, incentives like that.
That's why we give ample time, and per our tech team, you'll see some of these do mention paint. The reason our tech team recommended that be a findable item is that it can expose the base material to the elements. It can harm the structure. So to your point, there's ample time to make the remediation, and we are in our best faith trying to comply with ORC and make sure the structures remain in good standing.
Well, I'm pretty satisfied. Jessica, y'all have any more questions or see anything else?
So tell me if this is a different process, because I just might not know. When I was looking at the list, and you sent it before too, I didn't see any that dealt with the AMI of the person that was being rented to. Is there a process for if these abatements are given and they don't demonstrate that they're renting to a person who's of the AMI that they're supposed to? Is that a different process?
That is a different process.
Okay.
The affordability requirements are created by the city. ORC allows us to do it, but ORC does not really inform the requirements themselves. So what we do for those is we sign a separate agreement with that property owner, whether it's a homeowner or whether it is a project sponsor of a rental product. And every year, they submit a compliance report to us showing all the units that they are renting at those affordable AMIs, the total occupants of the household, the total rent they're levying, the estimated utilities of that unit. It's an annual process. They submit them every year by March 1. So David Parrish on our team does a lot of that work, looking through the reports and making sure the project sponsors are compliant. But yes, that is a separate process. The Housing Council is not part of that. That's internal matter to the city.
So he has a process of working with property owners to ensure they are renting to somebody within the required AMI. And if they're not, and you remove an abatement because of that, that's an internal process?
Exactly.
Okay, okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
So is it, the process you're talking about, how does the city know if they are ready to somebody within that AMI? There is a process for knowing that?
They're saying that there's a process that they submit documentation showing that, and then if they're not in compliance, they do something internally? Am I understanding that?
Exactly. The agreements spell out the penalty structure. Off the top of my head, there are grace periods from like we found if there were a rent issue. There is a period to correct that with the tenant. We also invoke the right to inspect records if we need more information. We rely on an Excel spreadsheet that's pretty detailed, but if that's not giving us the context we need, we do have the right to inspect records. We have done that in the past.
I'd like to spend some time with y'all to learn more about that, because I'm always just really thrown back about like rental prices. I'm just like, whoa. And so, but people's incomes change. So when I go in, it could be one thing. And yeah, I would definitely be interested in learning a little bit more about.
Absolutely. And the next part of the presentation, we will talk about some program outcomes, which that won't quite get to what you're talking about, but it will talk about like how many units of certain AMIs we've been able to secure. Before we move on to that, though, are there any more questions on the inspections?
No.
Okay.
Jessica?
I was just gonna say, I think my question I could ask when we get to the outcomes.
Okay. So I will ask for a first and a second amongst the body, amongst the Housing Council for a vote to authorize us to issue these finding letters. And
Deborah
then
Diggs, so moved, yeah.
a first from Deborah Diggs,
Second?
a second from Jessica, and then a full vote in the affirmative to allow us to issue the letters.
Aye.
Unanimous out of the three. Thank you. I will turn to the presentation. Our legislative activity from 2024 to the present, we've been really focusing on improving our operations. In 2024, we created the Columbus Housing CRA, which absorbed about 25 to 30 existing different CRAs into one body. This made a huge difference for us internally. It reduced our compliance matters with the state dramatically, having one CRA instead of 25 plus. It simplified things for applicants to navigate our own program. And we've also been working on other areas of the program to reduce the digital paperwork required to get the incentive. And speaking of digital paperwork, our online platform, neighborly.com, is how we do our applications nowadays. We did our soft launch in summer of 2022, hard launch in 2023. It's been a huge help for us to navigate, to us to approve applications, and it's eased access for applicants as well. In addition to that transition from paper to digital, as well as streamlining the CRA structure itself, we've also made some smart changes to reduce the digital paperwork of applications. One example is for low-income housing tax credit or LIHTC projects. These are projects where the units will be rented between 30 to 80% of AMI, always averaging out to 60% AMI. Those units will well exceed our minimum program requirements, and they commit that to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, and there's great documentation that's publicly available to show that. So for a LIHTC project, we don't request as much paperwork from them on the affordability side because we can access the LIHTC information. That's just one example. We've also made our paperwork easier to understand for the right audiences. So for example, if it is an affordable owner-occupied product at 120% AMI or lower, David Parrish on our team did a great job working with the city attorney's office to make the language simpler. Not everyone can have an attorney on staff to understand these legal documents. We want it to be more comparable to the mortgage market. We also simplified our fee schedule and all sorts of other improvements. And collectively, amongst all those changes, I'm really excited to say that our approval rate, our approval speed is over 400% what it had been before these changes. So a quintupling of our speed to approve applications. And this has made things better for us, better for the public. And throughout that, we've also been making map tweaks, as we discussed with Edward. And that's really been our focus the past year and a half, 2 years. Now, here are some program outcomes. This data, except for the first 3 lines, is all relevant for year-end 24. The first 3 are for year-end 2024. We rely on the Franklin County Auditor data to be the most authoritative source here. They have not yet released the 2025 data set. Abated parcels, this program, as of end of 2024, was about 1.2% of all parcels in the city. Estimating the 2025 ad would be about 1.5%, but that's speculative. I really want to rely on the county auditor data to be the most authoritative source here. About $3.8 million in appraised value, about $70 million in the abatement value. Between 2019 through 2025, we've incentivized over 20,000 housing units. As far as the affordability, you'll see that we have secured 222 units at 60% AMI, over 1,000 to 80% AMI, 442 at 100% AMI, and 10 at 120% AMI. The affordable homeownership product is pretty new to the program. That's why that number is fairly low. I imagine that 10 will be much higher next year. In addition, we also count units that are affordable but are not affordable because of us, but affordable due to other factors, LIHTC, Habitat for Humanity, COSIC. That count is about 2,400. About 1,100 of which are LIHTC units. The balance of that 300 are through other affordable housing partners. And then about 419 fee in lieu units and about 3.9 million in the fee in lieu amount.
I have some questions,
Yeah.
if it's okay. So like we were talking about before, has there been any compliance in terms of the tenants residing in the units, like removing abatements for those who aren't renting to people of the right AMI? Like, I know you said you have like an internal compliance component, but has that ever resulted in removing an abatement for that reason?
Thanks for that question. It has not. We have not revoked an abatement on that basis. There have been findings in the past, and when that happens, as I mentioned, we do work with that property owner to make it right. There is a timeline and structure in each individual agreement we sign with that project sponsor. We reserve the right to inspect more records. We have done that as well. And so in the few circumstances where we found this, we've been able to rectify that with the property owner.
So Jessica, do they have to report? I'm sorry. Do they have to report if and when that was the change? So if I, as a couple, moved in and we met the AMI for the property, and for some reason we separated, so that income went with the other person, I mean, is that reported, or is there a process? Or how do we know if it changes? Or let's say I'm single and I move in and I get a second job, or I get a better paying job that boosts me up. I mean, is
Is it like a yearly?
is there a mechanism in place for that to?
Yeah, so there's a document that's publicly available called Director's Rules, and it stipulates a lot of the situations. What happens if I'm a 2-person household, one person moves out?
Okay.
What if I get an additional roommate? There's a lot of nuance there, but what I do want to share there is that the initial household is income tested upon lease up. If that tenant gets a better paying job, they're not penalized for that. They were income tested at the point of lease, and we don't want to penalize people for advancing their lives.
Sure.
That's a good thing, but yes, that's good, that's good. I just was wondering, because I said things just shift sometimes.
Of course. Yeah, it's a good question. It's an important question.
And my other question is about the fee in lieu. I remember last year we talked about what that money would be spent on and that you guys were still determining how to spend the money. And it looks like it's increased. It's almost 4 million. Have you guys spent any of that money, or is there like plans in the future with how to spend it?
We have. So we have used about 1 million of that for homeownership initiatives, particularly through the ADDIE program internally. That money is still going to be kept within the mission of supporting affordable housing, and we have used some of those funds to support that work.
So then, is that about 4 million is that inclusive of the 1 million that's been spent?
It's inclusive. So that 4 million figure is all the fee in lieu that's been collected. And I do want to, one little clarifier there too, and maybe I should break that out for the next meeting. There's a pretty big distinction between how the 2018 policy dealt with fee in lieu versus the 2022 policy. So for the 2018 policy, which is projects that got their permits issued before August 31 of 2023, that money went to CDCs, Habitat for Humanity and others. So the city did not get those funds, but they did go to affordable housing partners. For projects under the 2022 policy, so those are ones that got permits issued after August 31 of 2023, those are funds that we receive. But I'll break that out for the next meeting for sure. And if you want to break out more soon, I'm happy to share that breakout.
That would be interesting. But also, like, what is the plan to spend the 2.9 million that's left, and then like whatever comes in the future? Is there like a set plan, or is it funding that gets utilized as needed?
There are no plans that I'm aware of at this, but I'm always happy to share back with this body if there's interest in being informed of that sooner than the next meeting.
I think it would, and I think it would also be interesting to know what can those funds be spent on. Is there like parameters? Is it like home ownership? Could it be rental assistance? Could it be eviction prevention? I don't know what the parameters are.
We do want to keep those funds in the general sphere of supporting our housing initiatives. I don't have more specific information beyond that. The usage of some of these funds for ADDIE was the first time we've ever done this. But I'm happy to share more information as we continue down that path.
I would be interested, and I do kind of I like those suggestions that you made, like to have something in place, maybe not overall general public, but maybe related to people that have the tax abatements. If someone had something happen and their income dipped, not if it went up, but say if you got in a car accident and you was off work and you needed some assistance to keep you in the housing versus not.
And
Yeah.
I think from my 2 cents, I know I'm like coming from a different perspective, but I think it would be good to have a plan of how they would be spent in the next year. That way, like the initiatives that I know everybody cares about, like could plan for what those things are. Just to have money sitting in an account. I'm sure there are a lot of great resources and programs within Department of Development that could utilize those funds.
Yeah, that point's well taken.
Yeah.
Is it earning interest?
I'm not aware. I'm happy to share that. I'm happy to look into it more, but I'm not aware.
No, I was gonna say, even if you did something with the interest on, what, $3 million, you could help
Yeah.
to change someone's life.
And with like the hard economic times that you were mentioning, the gas prices and rents and housing being unaffordable, I think having a plan of how like continually want to spend those funds would probably be good, rather than them sitting in an account, Just 2 cents.
Yeah. No, that
No,
point's well
I
taken.
send you your 2 cents, about a nickel. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. I really honestly don't know how people are doing it. Why we don't have more unhoused and things like that, because
Yeah, my personal perspective is that there is like some stigma around housing affordability. I imagine people are trying to make it work through doing more gig work, making really harsh economic sacrifices elsewhere.
Yeah.
A lot of unseen hurt due to the housing crisis.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all sit here and think about our TSA workers right now.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
How can we start a GoFundMe? I'm sorry, we said, because you were saying about the safe and sanitary housing. And so I was thinking about that when you were saying, like, there's so many different things, if it's just sitting there, that we can maybe be helping, because sometimes it's not the tenants, it's not through the tenant's fault or error, responsibility of sometimes, and sometimes property owners have hardships too now. I mean, let's just be truthful about that. Just because I own the property doesn't mean I haven't had maybe something on my end happen that's preventing me or prohibiting me from doing what I need to do.
And if I could add, like, I think the reason the fee in lieu exists is because some of the units aren't providing affordable units, so they're paying the fee in lieu of that, right?
That's correct.
So to then help in other ways, affordability, whether it's homeownership or rental assistance, you know, that would be nice to have like a plan set up of you're paying the fee in lieu, so here's what the city plans to do with those funds year over year going forward. Yeah.
That is my last official slide. Is there any other points of discussion we want to have today?
Matthew, did you want to add anything?
No, I appreciate the information you presented, and look forward to further engagement, especially on the fee and lieu discussions.
Because Jessica and I are not shy.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I think that's why we're here though, right? Because we're not shy.
Well, precisely. That's also why I share the program information. The Housing Council doesn't technically have a role in the affordability, but you certainly have an interest. You're certainly playing in the space, and we want to be transparent and share what we're doing.
I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I know you have a wonderful staff that
We,
should
yeah,
be very proud of.
we have a great team.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I'll call to adjourn. Do I have a first and a second?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how do I tell somebody?